Hello and welcome back to Bookish. Today I want to do a review of James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. Um, I'm a big fan of James Baldwin late in life, converted to his excellence as a writer and a thinker, and so with everything going on in the world and with this being Pride Month, I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to read Giovanni's Room. So Giovanni's Room is essentially the story of a young man named David who is struggling with his sexuality and whose unwillingness to accept the fact that he is in fact a gay man has tragic consequences. So the story of the novel essentially centers on this character named David who's had a rough childhood, growing up period. His mother died. His father becomes an alcoholic. He lives in an unhappy home. He's kind of repeating that pattern that his father followed, so he decides to escape that after a car accident, and he moves to Paris. In Paris, he becomes involved with a young woman who's named Hella, and he believes that he's in love with her, and he proposes to her. She goes off to Spain to think about his proposal and to spend really several months in Spain traveling around. And in that time, it's in that time period where Hella is in Spain that most of the action of the story takes place. Young David finds himself in a situation where he can't pay his rent, and he has to turn to essentially an older gay man from Paris for financial support, with the implication that sex would be returned for this financial support. One night, when he's with this older man, they go to a bar which has a reputation for being a place where gay men met and hung out, and he meets and falls in love with the title character Giovanni. He and Giovanni begin a relationship, a romance, in Hella's absence, and David moves into Giovanni's room. As Hella's return from Spain approaches, David becomes increasingly agitated in his relationship with Giovanni, in large part because despite the fact that he's probably more in love with Giovanni than he's ever been with anybody else in his life, he cannot accept and is unwilling to live his life as a gay man. And from that point on, tragedy ensues, which I won't really go into. So a couple of things just real quick. There's some things about this book that I thought were great. You know, I won't hide my opinion. I think James Baldwin is a great writer. I think his books, all four of the novels of his that I've read, are excellent. I just think he's great. So I like the book. I'm going to tell you that. One of my favorite things in the book is the scene in which David and Giovanni meet. This is one of my favorites because it's just one of the greatest, I think, descriptions of falling in love and love at first sight, and that kind of electric energy that can exist between two people. Neighbor's dog disagrees, and I just thought that was great. I love Paris. I've been there briefly twice, and one of the things I've discovered as I've gotten older is that almost any book set in Paris I really like, which probably explains, in part my love for Balzac because of that. And the description here, I think, of Paris and maybe the seedy underside of Paris is just brilliant. There's a long set piece scene set in the markets of Les Halles, as the vendors and the butchers and all the produce vendors are getting ready and stuff's coming in, that I just thought was great. So it has that aspect to it that I really liked. I think that Baldwin does a great job of depicting the pain of a young man struggling with his sexuality, struggling against accepting the reality of his sexuality, and I think that internal struggle is really depicted pretty well, and all the forces which might be going into trying to convince David, or to have David act against his nature, to have David force himself into heterosexual relationship instead of this relationship with Giovanni, I think are well depicted. There is a really painful scene in which he is in search of a woman with whom he can have sex, in part to prove that he is not gay, that his relationship with Giovanni wasn't special. And that scene in which he meets a woman he knows and they do have sex is, I just think, really powerful in its ability to depict how hollow those kind of relationships can be, and how each person is searching for something that they're not going to find. My one criticism of the book, and I think this may be the first time I've criticized a James Baldwin book. Well, two criticisms, I should say. Baldwin has a tendency to depict women in fairly negative ways. And I don't know if this was sexism on his part or if he is just trying to illustrate the sexism of the time period. But that can be a bit disturbing. In this book, less, I think, for the most part, than some of the others. But also then, my other criticism would be that the stakes that Baldwin creates for David's rejection of his homosexuality, the fact that David is gay and is unwilling in embracing who he really is, the stakes there are kind of melodramatically high, not for David, but for the people around him. And I won't say more because it gives something away, but there's a little bit of melodrama, I think, in the setup for kind of the consequences of David's decisions. And then, one of the things I thought was most interesting about the book, and this is be kind of where I leave off, one of the most interesting things about the book is that David is a white man, and Giovanni is a white man, and Hella is a white woman. Somebody in the park with a loud stereo, great. And that Baldwin, an African-American gay man, is here choosing to write this story from the point of view of a white man. He's excellent at it, and I don't have any problem with that at all. And I probably wouldn't have thought about it much at all if I hadn't watched Ashley from the Bookish Realm's recent review video about intersectionality, in which she reviewed two books, Hood Feminism and Boys Aren't Always Blue, or Not Every Boy is Blue. I'm sorry, I kind of forgot the title of that book. I'll leave a link to her video down below, because having watched that video, it made me think about intersectionality right before I picked this up. And so what I believe Baldwin is doing here is he's simplifying his story by making David white and not an African-American man, as Baldwin was. And Baldwin did move and live in Paris for a while in the 1950s and 60s. By doing that, he's eliminating one of the problems that David would have to confront, and that is the problem of racism, so that he can focus on David's struggle with his sexuality and make that the focus of the book. So I just thought that was really kind of an interesting choice, and it speaks so much to the problem that people who are faced with this intersectionality problem, the problem that people who belong to more than one typically oppressed population group face, is that it's not just one problem. It's not, and maybe problem's the wrong word, it's not just one thing they have to struggle with in terms of society, but several. Anyway, I love the book. I thought it was great. I'm glad that I was able to get a copy and get it read really quickly here this month, because it, as I said, with almost all Baldwin books, it was a really rewarding experience. Anyway, if you've read Giovanni's Room, or if you have any other comments, let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.